It had been a long drive from the airport, but Emily's heart felt light as she imagined the Thanksgiving dinner awaiting her. After months of planning and preparation, it was supposed to be a time of warmth, laughter, and family togetherness. Mark had assured her everything was ready at his mother's house, and she couldn't wait to finally relax and enjoy the holiday with him, his mother, and his stepfather, Victor. But when she arrived, the house felt eerily empty. There were no festive smells wafting from the kitchen, no sounds of family gatherings or the usual holiday excitement. Instead, there was just a cold silence that seemed to stretch throughout the house. Emily called out, but there was no response. She stepped further into the house, and then at the end of the hallway she saw him. Victor sitting in a rocking chair staring at her with his cold blue eyes. His posture was unremarkable, his cane resting beside him, but there was something in his eyes, a perceptiveness, an understanding that made Emily feel like she was being watched as if he knew something she didn't. Before she could say anything, she noticed the note on the kitchen counter. It was hastily written in Mark's familiar handwriting, "Gone on a cruise with Hannah. You'll stay home and take care of Victor. He needs you." Emily's breath caught in her throat as the reality of the situation hit her all at once. Mark, her husband of 5 years, had gone away with a colleague, someone he had mentioned increasingly often in the past few months. Her hands trembled as she read the note again. "No, this can't be real," Emily whispered, barely believing her eyes. Victor, seemingly aware of the turmoil in her mind, spoke in his raspy voice, his eyes never leaving her. "Shall we begin?" He said the words heavy with something Emily couldn't quite place. She didn't respond immediately but nodded, still reeling from the shock of her husband's betrayal. Emily sank into a kitchen chair, trying to make sense of the bizarre situation she found herself in. She had arrived at the Mitchell family home just 30 minutes ago, eager to surprise her husband and start the holiday together. Instead, she was greeted by silence and a note that left her stomach in knots. "I don't understand," she murmured, staring at the cold, empty kitchen. There were no signs of the Thanksgiving dinner she had been promised, no smells of turkey, no football games blaring from the living room, no laughter filling the air. "Where's everyone?" she asked Victor, her voice small. Victor shuffled to the refrigerator, his cane tapping against the floor as he moved. He pulled out a bottle of water and handed it to her with a slight nod, his voice low. "Been like this all week, quiet as a tomb." They left Tuesday morning. Emily's mind raced as she struggled to piece things together. She tried calling Mark again, but as expected, it went straight to voicemail. Again. Victor continued, unaffected by her rising frustration. "Hope you brought groceries. They didn't even stock the fridge properly." Emily hadn't. She had brought cranberry sauce sweet potatoes and all the ingredients for her special apple pie, thinking she would be contributing to the meal her husband had promised would be a family celebration. Instead, she was standing in a kitchen devoid of anything familiar. Victor shuffled over to the living room, taking a slow sip of his water, while Emily stood there, her thoughts racing. Where was Mark? Why was he gone? Why wasn't he here for Thanksgiving? Just as she was about to break down, her phone pinged with an Instagram notification. It wasn't Mark, but Brady's sister had tagged him in a photo, and despite herself, Emily opened the app. Her fingers trembled as she clicked on the post, and the image knocked the breath out of her. It was Mark standing on a cruise ship deck, his arm around a young blonde woman, Hannah. They were toasting champagne flutes to the camera. The caption read, "New Beginnings Caribbean Getaway with Brady Mitchell and Family." Family. The word stung like salt in an open wound. Emily scrolled through more photos of Mark and Hannah enjoying romantic dinners, pictures of Brady's mother sipping cocktails, looking relaxed and happy. The realization hit her like a freight train. They were on a cruise together without me. The betrayal cut deeper than just the affair. Mark had planned this entire thing while I was busy buying gifts and taking time off work for a Thanksgiving celebration that didn't exist. "Find something interesting." Victor's voice startled her. Emily turned to face him, the phone still in her trembling hands. Victor looked at her with a knowing glint in his eyes. "They've been planning this for months. Hannah's been in the picture for at least 3 months. She's been calling here asking for Brady." Pretty voice, terrible laugh. Emily's jaw dropped, he knew. "You knew?" she whispered, her voice shaking. Victor nodded, unfazed. "I know a lot of things. They don't think I notice." He tapped his temple with a gnarled finger. "Mine's still sharp despite what Brady tells everyone." Emily's thoughts spiraled, and without thinking, she opened the banking app on her phone. A sudden thought hit her. What if the money's gone? Her heart sank as she checked the balance. There just a few days ago was a $200 withdrawal, almost their entire savings. The money they had been putting aside for a down payment on a house. A house Brady had promised they would start looking for after the holidays. He took our savings, she thought, showing Victor the screen. Her voice trembled as she whispered, all of it. Victor wasn't surprised. They've been doing the same to me for years, taking a little here, a little there for your care. Meanwhile, they buy themselves designer purses while I get this, he said, gesturing to the neglected kitchen. Emily felt a wave of sickness roll over her. It wasn't just about the betrayal of an affair anymore. It was about being abandoned not just by her husband, but by his entire family. It was about lies, manipulation, and neglect. This wasn't just a ruined Thanksgiving. This was calculated abandonment. Her phone rang. Her best friend Leah was calling to wish her a happy Thanksgiving, but Emily couldn't bring herself to answer. She couldn't explain the humiliation she felt yet. Leftover soup, Victor asked, his voice offering a strange sort of comfort in its bluntness. No, Emily said, her voice firm. We deserve better than leftover soup. She grabbed her coat and purse. I'm going to the grocery store. We're having a proper meal today. Victor looked surprised, then pleased. Haven't had a home-cooked meal in months. Brady always brings fast food when he bothers to come by. The grocery store was a blur. Emily moved through the aisles, her thoughts still racing. How long had Mark been planning this? The suddenness of it all was overwhelming, but there was something else, something deeper stirring within her. Anger, yes. Betrayal, certainly. But there was also an unshakable sense of clarity. This wasn't just about Mark's abandonment or the affair with Hannah. This was about the years of manipulation, the deceit, the broken promises. She had given everything for this marriage, for this family, and now, with the flick of a pen, it had all been taken from her. Emily mechanically picked out a turkey breast, potatoes, and some vegetables, barely registering the other shoppers around her. She didn't have time to linger over decisions anymore. She just needed to fix this, to reclaim what had been stolen from her, even if that meant standing up to the people who had let her down. When she returned, Victor had cleared the kitchen counter, making room for the groceries she had brought. He sat at the table with a stack of papers in front of him. His frail hands, once shaky, now moved with a precision that unnerved her. What's all this? Emily asked, setting the bags down. Her gaze following the papers scattered across the table. Evidence, Victor said, his voice quiet but purposeful. Emily glanced at the stack, her eyes widening. She hadn't expected this, but as she leaned in, her heart started to pound. It was a collection of bank statements, medical records, and meticulous documentation of neglect. The pages detailed every instance of his family's mistreatment of him, missed doctor appointments, medication delays, and the financial drain they'd been slowly siphoning off for years. Her breath caught in her throat. Why are you showing me this? She asked, unsettled by the cold, methodical nature of the records. Victor leaned back in his chair, his gaze intense. Because you've been wrong too, Jade, and because I don't have much time left. His voice dropped, carrying the weight of finality. Victor wasn't just documenting his family's neglect. He was preparing for something bigger. Emily's mind raced. What do you mean wrong? Victor's eyes softened, but his voice held a note of determination. I've been keeping track of their abuse, financial, emotional. It's all here. He tapped the stack of papers. And now I need you to help me make them pay. Emily's confusion deepened, but the seriousness in his eyes stopped her from asking more questions. Whatever was happening, it was too late for regrets. And yet she couldn't help but feel that her involvement in this plan, was inevitable. Her entire world had just been turned upside down. Victor leaned forward, his gaze piercing. They think they've left you with a burden, but they've given us an opportunity for justice. The words hit her like a jolt of electricity. Justice. What would that look like? What could she do with the knowledge of Mark's betrayal and the abuse Victor had suffered for so long? What kind of opportunity? Emily asked quietly. Victor's lips curled into a thin smile, his frail body suddenly seeming to fill the room with purpose. I want you to help me document everything they've done to us. The neglect, the financial exploitation, the lies. Once that's done, we'll use it. We'll make sure they get exactly what they deserve. Emily felt her pulse quicken. A strange sense of empowerment stirred within her. She had never imagined herself as the type to take revenge. But here she was, facing the reality of Mark's abandonment and the twisted reality of a family who had systematically taken advantage of her and of Victor. For the first time since she arrived, Emily felt like she had a purpose. She wasn't just the victim anymore. She was part of something much bigger. And the thought of facing her husband Mark, the man who had once been her entire world, filled her with a sense of resolve. The next few days were a blur of activity. Emily helped Victor document every detail of his life, every instance of neglect, every financial discrepancy. They worked together as if their shared purpose bonded them, two people who had been wronged by the same family, now determined to make them pay for their actions. The more they worked, the more Emily realized just how deep the betrayal ran. Victor had been robbed of his dignity, his health, and his wealth, all in the name of maintaining appearances. But the worst part was realizing that her own life, her own marriage, had been manipulated in the same way. The love, the promises, the dreams of a future, they were all lies built on a foundation of control. Victor was surprisingly sharp for someone in his condition, his mind clear and focused despite his terminal diagnosis. Emily began to see a different side of him, the man who had been overlooked and taken advantage of for so long. In his eyes, she could see a quiet resilience, a strength that came from surviving the worst life could throw at him. One afternoon, after several intense sessions of going through Victor's medical records, Emily found herself sitting with him at the kitchen table, staring at the stacks of evidence they had compiled. It was time to make the next move. "I've been thinking," Emily said, her voice steady. "We need to get the word out. We need to make sure Brady and his mother know exactly what they've done. They've taken everything from you and from me. We can't let them get away with it." Victor nodded slowly, his expression thoughtful. "We will. I've been planning this for a while. The legal paperwork is already in place, but we need to build our case. The neighbors, they'll be the key. They've seen everything. They'll testify." Emily's mind raced. The neighbors. They had seen Victor's decline, witnessed the neglect, but more importantly, they had seen the way Brady and Elaine had treated him, the way they'd left him to rot while they enjoyed their vacations. She picked up her phone, determined to call every neighbor who had witnessed the abuse. She would gather their testimonies and add them to their growing file. It was Saturday when Patricia Winters, Victor's attorney, arrived with the final legal documents. She was a sharp, no-nonsense woman in her 60s, with impeccable silver hair and piercing green eyes. Her presence in the house felt like a subtle shift in the atmosphere, like the calm before a storm. Patricia was brief but thorough, laying out the steps they needed to take to ensure that Victor's will would stand up to any contestation from Brady and Elaine. The papers were signed, the assets transferred, and with each signature, Emily felt a weight lifting off her shoulders. Victor had done everything in his power to secure his legacy, to ensure that Emily would be cared for after his passing. His investments, his assets, they were all now in her hands. "I'll make sure they hear every word," Patricia assured them after the documents were finalized. With the legal groundwork laid, the next step was to confront the family. But Emily knew that before that happened, there was one more thing they needed to do. "I need to get the letter," Victor said, his voice suddenly weak. He motioned for her to follow him. They went into the small office where Victor had kept a folder of his most important documents. Inside there was a letter, one addressed directly to Brady and his family. Victor had written it himself, detailing the years of neglect, the abandonment, and the betrayal. It wasn't just an angry tirade, it was a statement of clarity of someone who had lived through the worst and finally found the strength to call it out for what it was. "I want them to hear it from me," Victor said, his voice soft but resolute. "Let them know exactly what they've lost." By the time Brady and his family returned from their cruise, the plan had been set in motion. The house, which had once been filled with emptiness and betrayal, now felt like the calm before a storm. Emily stood by the window watching as their car pulled into the driveway. Her heart beat steadily in her chest, not out of fear, but anticipation. She was ready. Victor had already instructed her on how to handle the situation. They would stand firm, present the evidence, and make sure they had no room to deny the truth. They were no longer the victims. They were the ones with the power, and now it was time for the Mitchells to face the consequences of their actions. As the door opened, Brady walked in, first followed by his mother Elaine, his sister Melissa, and finally Hannah, the woman who had been the catalyst for this entire situation. Emily could see the sunburns on their faces, the fake smiles plastered on their lips. They were carrying shopping bags, souvenirs from the cruise, and an air of obliviousness that only made Emily's resolve harden. "Honey, we're home," Brady said in a cheery voice, the false warmth grating on Emily's nerves. His eyes swept the room before landing on her. His smile faltered. "What's with the funeral getup?" Elaine brushed past him, dropping her designer handbag on the console table as if she were stepping into her own home, unaware that anything was wrong. "Where's Dad? Is he napping?" she asked casually, as though her husband wasn't dying in the other room. Emily's heart sank, but her voice remained steady as she turned to face them. "Victor passed away Saturday night," she said, her voice quiet but unyielding. Brady froze, his face going pale as the shopping bag slipped from his hands, falling to the floor with a thud. Hannah, unsure of what to do, took a step back toward the door, clearly uncomfortable in the face of this unexpected revelation. Elaine's face hardened as her posture shifted, her casual demeanor gone. "What do you mean, passed away?" she demanded, as if Emily had made some sort of mistake in vocabulary. "He died peacefully in his sleep around midnight." Emily continued, her composure unwavering. "The funeral service was yesterday afternoon. Many of your neighbors attended along with Victor's friends from his banking days. Quite a lovely turnout, actually." Brady's face cycled through shock, disbelief, and then, most tellingly, calculation. Emily could see the wheels turning in his head, his thoughts shifting from the shock of Victor's death to the inconvenient reality that he had missed it all. "You held the funeral without us, without his family." Brady sputtered, his anger starting to creep through the cracks in his polished facade. "His family was invited," Emily replied, her voice calm but firm. "I left multiple messages about his declining condition. You chose not to respond." Melissa stepped forward, her face pale beneath her tan. "I told you about that call, Brady. Uncle Victor looked really bad." Brady waved her off impatiently. "This is unbelievable. We need to sit down and figure this out." "Yes, we do," Emily agreed, gesturing toward the living room. She could see the tension building, the guilt eating away at them as the truth began to sink in. They were the ones who had abandoned Victor, left him to die alone while they vacationed in the Caribbean, pretending to be a family. They walked into the living room, but none of them dared to sit in the rocking chair that had once been Victor's. It was as if the empty chair now stood as a monument to the way they had all treated him. Emily stood in front of it, her gaze fixed firmly on Brady and Elaine. "There are some things you need to know," she began, her voice steady. She picked up the cream-colored envelope with Victor's letter inside. "Victor left this letter to be read to you upon your return." Elaine, never one to hide her impatience, cut in. "Did he change his will? Is that what this is about?" Emily met her eyes directly. "Perhaps you should hear his words first." She unfolded the letter and began to read aloud, her voice calm and deliberate. The words Victor had written were simple but damning. "The greatest pain in life is not illness or even death, but the realization that those you loved saw you only as an obligation, a task to be managed, an inconvenience to be tolerated." As she read, she watched their reactions. Elaine's face hardened defensively, her mouth tight with disbelief. Brady's fidgeting grew more frantic, and Melissa looked increasingly uncomfortable, her eyes shifting between her brother and Emily, as if she was starting to see the truth, albeit slowly. When Emily finished reading, a heavy silence filled the room. It was like the air had become thick with the weight of Victor's final words. Brady, unable to contain his frustration, finally broke the silence. "This is all a setup," he spat, jabbing a finger toward Emily. "She manipulated a dying man." "No," Emily cut him off. "Victor was perfectly lucid. I interrupted you once, but I'll say it again," he made a video statement. "You might want to see it." Brady's face twisted in frustration, but Emily was done entertaining his excuses. She pressed play on the tablet and Victor's voice filled the room. His calm, methodical delivery was shocking in its precision. He described years of neglect, of the way his family had treated him, not as a loved one, but as a burden to be discarded when it became inconvenient. As the video played, Elaine's face turned red. Brady's jaw tightened, his eyes darting around the room trying to avoid the harsh truths that were now laid bare in front of him. "This is all lies," Brady finally said, his voice shaking. "She's lying. None of this is true." But Emily had had enough. "You don't get to do this anymore, Brady. You don't get to manipulate and lie your way out of everything. Not this time." Victor's letter wasn't the only piece of evidence they had. Emily had spent hours collecting bank statements, medical records, and testimonies from neighbors who had witnessed the neglect. She laid it all out in front of them, everything that had been taken, everything that had been hidden. "This is what your family has done, Brady," Emily said, her voice cutting through the tension. "You've taken money from Victor's accounts for years, and now you've left him to die alone. This is who you are." Elaine's hands shook as she reached for one of the documents, her eyes scanning the details. She looked up at Emily, her face pale. "You can't do this," she hissed. "You can't just take everything from us. This house, this life, it's ours." "No," Emily replied, her voice unwavering. "This house, these assets, this life, it's not yours anymore. Victor left everything to me. I'm the trustee now, and everything you thought was yours is gone." Patricia Winters, Victor's attorney, walked into the room carrying a folder of documents. "I'm here to inform you of the provisions of Victor's will," she said calmly, her tone professional but firm. Elaine scoffed, her voice dripping with disdain. "This is just another trick. We're the family. We're the ones who get everything." Patricia held up a hand to silence her. "The will is very clear. Victor left the entirety of his estate to Jade Mitchell with provisions for charitable donations to elder abuse prevention organizations. You've been disinherited due to your neglect." Brady's smug smile faltered and his face drained of color. "You're lying. This can't be real." "It's very real," Patricia said, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Victor was examined by 2 physicians who certified his mental competence at the time of signing. This is legally binding." As the family's facade crumbled, so did their sense of entitlement. The truth was finally out. They had been caught, and there was no escaping the consequences. When Victor had passed, Emily had felt a strange sense of loss, not just for him, but for the family she had once believed in. Now, with everything revealed, she felt a sense of justice. She had helped Victor find peace in his final days, and she had exposed the dark truth about the people who had neglected him. As she looked at the shattered family before her, Emily knew that this was only the beginning. The damage had been done, but she was no longer the victim. She was the one with the power now, and she was going to make sure they understood exactly what they had lost. She turned toward the door, her gaze lingering on the empty chair where Victor had once sat, and with a final glance at the family she had once called her own, she walked away. This was her moment of closure, her moment to start anew. The family could fight her in court. They could cry and beg. But in the end, they had lost everything they thought they were entitled to. And Emily, she was finally free.